Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 34. Now a weekly show, which is all getting quite fun. Meeting a lot of folk now, as opposed to the sort of maybe one a week here and there and trying to keep it a couple of months ahead. It's now 3 or 4 a week, which was really good. Meeting a lot of folk throughout the industry. Really interesting one today, as they all are. I say that every single time. Really interesting one today. I probably wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't an interesting one today. Today we have Lynbreck Croft, and we've got Lynn in particular from Lynbreck. If you want to say hello there, Lynn.
Hello, it's nice to be here. Thanks so much for inviting us to be a part of this. It's very exciting.
Before we get on into another excellent episode of the R2Kast, I would just like to thank the sponsor for the show today, The Scottish Farmer, a weekly magazine highlighting everything you need to know regarding the Scottish agricultural industry, whether it's breaking news, events happening in the sector, market reports, classified ads, or just wholesome stories happening in the industry. The Scottish Farmer's got it for you.
Absolute pleasure. One half of Lynbreck Croft here today. And I apologise, Lynn, for in the past few emails, I've just been spelling your name as Lynn and Lynbreck, so I apologise, which I have since found out is incorrect.
Okay. You're not the first and you won't be the last.
It's just too simple, that just two need each other.
I know. It's a common question, did you name Lynbreck after you? And it used to be like, so you're Lynn, and then they'd look at Sandra and go, and are you Breck? And it was, no, it's not. It's not that. So yeah, it's cool. It's all good.
When you expand and buy a second farm, it's going to have to be Sandra Breck, isn't it?
I'm going to make a note of that.
You shouldn't really have to try and remember that. It should be quite easy.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm sure quite a lot of you have came across Lynn before. And Sandra, just Lynn here with us today, though, on social media or on the telly. Very exciting. Or as just mentioned off camera, newspapers and such like. They are what you would say farming famous. I would say it's what I like to sort of coined that term myself, but I'm taking it anyway. But as we always do, I quite like to hear a bit about the background, about the people on the podcast. So could you tell us, Lynn, just a bit, and talk for Sandra as well, that would be really good, about your sort of background. Was it farming or was it not?
So the short answer to that is no for both of us. So a little bit about me, first of all. So I grew up in Northern Ireland, and I left when I was 19 to go to university, and I studied archaeology in Birmingham. So I moved, away from home and moved over to England. Studied archaeology, worked for a short while as an archaeologist, and then, like a lot of people, kind of leapt around from different career paths to others. I worked in youth work. I worked as a ski rep at a ski resort. I did all sorts of things, and really what I was trying to do was figure out what it was that I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I always had this kind of passion for nature and the outdoors, and so in my kind of late 20s I decided to kind of completely retrain, and I managed to get a position as an apprenticeship with the National Trust. So that again was in England, and that meant that I was kind of outdoors working in nature and really, really loved that. Sandra, she grew up on the outskirts of Zurich in Switzerland. Her dad is from Switzerland, but her mum's actually from just outside Dundee. So she grew up in Switzerland, but came to Scotland, back and forth all the time. Trained as a librarian, so also not a farmer. And then followed a kind of a similar kind of life path, I guess, and that she tried lots of different things, and then eventually found herself also working as an apprentice ranger for the National Trust. And then that's where we met. And really, Wallace, it was quite early on that we kind of had this shared dream of living a life that was much more in harmony with the kind of the land. So really kind of getting back to nature. So we decided to leave our jobs with the National Trust and move up to Scotland because Sandra felt kind of really drawn to Scotland, and also because land is more affordable up here, and that's the kind of the fact of it. So we lived in the Borders for 2 years, tree planting, and we used that as a kind of a base for which to kind of look for land. And fast forward 2 years from being there, we found Lynbreck Croft, and here we are today.
Brilliant. And I'd like to get into how the sort of process involved in getting Lynbreck, because it's quite interesting. Crofting is not just small farms. There's more to it.
Absolutely.
and that'll be quite interesting. I do quite want to ask one thing as a person in education, apprenticeships and such always interest me. What was involved in that apprenticeship in particular?
So it was an absolutely incredible experience, and I only wish I'd had the opportunity to do it 10 years earlier. So the apprenticeship that we both did, it sort of changed slightly when Sandra did hers, because she did hers a year or two after mine, but mine was a 3-year apprenticeship. So we were paid a wage, and for the 3 years we went to agricultural college basically in 2-week blocks. So we went 5 times a year. So it was Reese Heath College down in Nantwich. And we'd go and stay residentially for 2 weeks with all the other trainee rangers. We'd have loads of classes on all elements of, things like countryside management. And then we go back and work on our different individual properties. Absolutely phenomenal experience. Brilliant. What an incredible way to learn, an incredible way to gain experience and meeting, people from all over all walks of life. So certainly my and Sandra's experiences of apprenticeships were just brilliant.
No, good. And it's good to hear that, because I mean, we do apprenticeships in agriculture, and it's interesting to hear how folk learn, because some folk just want to go into a classroom, they want to do it, and they want to leave. And the apprenticeship at that level is an excellent way of learning, and also being like in it, and not just sort of finishing a qualification and just getting thrown in. So no, that's good. Good to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, I did an undergraduate degree. I also did a master's degree in archaeology, so I'd kind of done the academic side. What I loved about the apprenticeship was that as soon as I learned something, I got to put it into practice. So my brain was still ticking away, even when I was out in the field, felling a tree, my brain was still ticking away. Super way to learn.
No, good. Brilliant. And it's so cool to hear. For the most part, apprentices are normally out of school, and that's great. I love to hear the sort of what's the saying, no wrong path, which I think is brilliant. Anyway, we've all got different ways of getting to the place we're in, and I think that's excellent. It's kind of hard to ask Sandra questions given she's not there.
Sandra,
hello. Oh no, headphone listeners, I'm sorry. I'll have to try and make that quieter. They make hands down the best chocolate, the Swiss. Brilliant milk, brilliant chocolate, but that's totally a side fact. So a life essentially not in agriculture.
Not at all.
For the both of you, which is really cool. I mean, when I started this podcast, it was purely aimed at so many people, mainly teenagers, were interested in, Wallace, how did you get into farming? And I was sort of in the privileged position of, God, I've got the easiest way in. Mum and dad own a big farm.
Yeah.
Overprivileged, if you will. And I don't think you can be overprivileged if you don't take advantage of it. But my thought was, let's see if I can show what's out there. And I think this is going to be a great story for that reason. 2016 was when you took over Lynbreck. So could you just tell us what was involved in that? How did it come about? And
so we found Lynbreck the year before, and we found it on the open market. We knew fairly early that it was a registered croft, so covered under crofting law. So whenever we were in the process of looking to purchase it, we had to recruit a crofting law specialist solicitor, I guess, to make sure that everything was kind of covered. We were in a very fortunate position. We were a little bit older in our lives in looking for land, so we'd managed to save up a bit of money, and that was basically the reason as to why we were able to, to buy the place. And I always say that because, whenever we talk about getting people into farming and crofting, getting people back on the land, the biggest barrier every time is not knowledge, it's not experience, it's I haven't got money and I haven't got any land. And that's a solution that, I don't have. None of us, I think, have to that problem. So, but I think we need to keep talking about it. We need to keep getting it out there. So anyway, we were in a position to buy the land, and we bought the land in 2016, moved here. Caveat is that whenever we were looking for somewhere to buy, we were looking for about 5 acres, because our plan was really, it was quite sort of focused on what it was that we wanted, which was to grow our own food, maybe have a few hens, and something like diversify into some camping plots, enough just to kind of pay the bills. Lynbreck was 150 acres. So quite a bit bigger than what we had been looking for. We fell in love with the land though, and we fell in love with the landscape and the view and the area, you know, the whole package. So whenever we arrived, we had to make a decision. So the decision is, do we stick with our original plan and take our kind of 1 acre onto the side of kitchen garden and all that kind of stuff, and then just let the rest do its own thing? Or do we completely replan and look at that landscape and think, you know, can we, you know, make it an incredible place for nature? It already is an incredible place for nature, but can we continue that, but also actually maybe look into using it as a farm, you know, as a working kind of croft, continuing on the kind of cultural heritage elements that had been for centuries before, doing it in a way where we were using all this incredible practical and academic ecological knowledge that we'd gained from our apprenticeship. So that's kind of, that was our footing. That was where we started. But no farming background. So it's all very well saying, oh, well, yeah, so we're going to create this nature-friendly farm, but I don't know anything about cattle. I don't know anything about pigs. You know, I always talk about how, you know, we've just got a book out at the minute, and I talk about how in that we learned that, you know, a cow is no longer just a cow, and a sheep is no longer just a sheep. You know, you've got cows, you've got heifers, you've got bullocks, you've got steers, you've got stots, you know, sheep, you've got yows, you've got gimmers, you've got top. We didn't know any of these words, and that was just scratching the surface of the kind of the hurdles that we had to overcome.
It's funny you say that, you know, you've got heifers, yada, yada, yada. First off, never heard of stots before.
Oh, there's a word for you.
What is it exactly?
It's a steer.
Right, okay, yeah, I assumed as much. And that's where it gets confusing. We bring students on and you're like, right, so what's a hog to you? And then this is different, a pig?
Yeah.
No, let's focus on sheep. You know, you know,
exactly.
It's totally different everywhere.
Yeah.
So first off, if you're listening and you don't follow Lynbreck Croft, it's Lynbreck_Croft on Instagram. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, give it a follow, because you mentioned the views, and oh my god, they are gorgeous. They really are.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. And it's near the Cairngorms, isn't it, or is it within? Yeah.
That's right. We're within the Cairngorms National Park. So the actual croft is, our nearest town is Grantown-on-Spey. So we're just on the kind of, I guess, the northeastern corner of the Cairngorms National Park. The croft itself is located at, we're 350 meters above sea level. So we're really, really high altitude. The top of the croft is pretty much all on a hill. So the lower part of the croft goes down to 320 meters and up to 450. And we face due south, which is wonderful because we get the sun, but that's where all the prevailing weather comes in. And basically, because we're on the side of the hill between us and Cairngorm, it's just air. So it gets pretty fierce. So not only, you know, so you kind of take all of that into context whenever we first moved here. You know, there was the kind of the knowledge side of thing. There was also the fact that we didn't have any money at this stage to do anything with. The croft was in a semi-derelict state, and we were in a really exposed, challenging farming climate. You know, we weren't in some nice kind of fertile valley. You know, we were on acidic soils, high exposure, short growing season, you know, you name it, we had that challenge to face.
Yeah, it's, do you know, embarrassingly, as a very proud Scots person, I have to say, I have not been more north than Perth.
Wow.
Yeah, embarrassingly, it's bad. And every time I speak to someone more north than Perth, it's wow, or it's, you know, get your act together or something. And by the looks of it, I really should be. So aim for 5 acres, have 150. Somewhat of a right.
How did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. This will be fun. Obviously with a strict focus on biodiversity and regeneration, which is great to see. Before we get into that, could I just quickly ask what sort of numbers of sheep and cattle you do have, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, so it sort of fluctuates throughout the year, but we've fairly small numbers overall. So we carry about 12 pigs, 12 rare breed pigs over the course of the year. We've got, in the summer, we're carrying about 7 head of cattle. We don't have any sheep. We've got about 70 hens, and we have about 8 hives of bees as well. So it's a really kind of diversified, you know, kind of typical small scale farming setup, I would say. Yeah,
no, I don't know where I'd go. I thought you did have sheep. Anyway, the what's the honey like?
Oh, I mean, it's like honey you've never tasted before. You know, it's just
Good salesperson.
it's yeah. I mean, it's incredible honey, because the one thing that's incredible about our honey is that we do we kind of like do two varieties. We do a wildflower honey, and then we do the heather honey. And the wildflower honey, I just think, blows my mind every year, because it's from wildflowers that are things like, you know, white clover. It's from tree pollen from things like early flowering willow. I mean, I'd never taste, and people generally have never tasted honey like it. It's so, I think, unique in its flavors. And I don't think there's many places that you can actually get really authentic wildflower honey that's not, you know, from flowers in your garden. You know, it's like hawthorn flowers and all that kind of thing. It's awesome.
No, absolutely awesome. And you know, I don't know if you follow a person called Carl from the Sustainable Hub down in England, and he's just very similar to yourself, sort of aiming to be self-sufficient, creating everything down to sugar in the form of honey. And honey's a bit.
Oh, wow.
Honey wasn't something I was overly interested in. I quite like honey and milk. Oh my god, delightful. Got very camp there. honey, honey is something that I've really started to sort of like take a spoonful of and enjoy, you know, and it's a fantastic product to try out.
Yeah.
There's a major focus, as I said, on biodiversity, regeneration, that sort of thing. So what does that mean? Tell us what that means.
So it means all sorts of things in different ways, I guess. And really, so we talk about you know, farming with nature, or following principles of what is very popularly now referred to as regenerative agriculture. All of this stuff, when we started out, you know, in 2016, was obviously all there, but it wasn't really talked about as much as it is now. You know, it's really talked about a lot, especially regen ag. The first thing was that, so we have Lynbreck, we've moved here, we have this land of opportunity, and we've no knowledge in farming. Initially, we think that's a real kind of negative thing. You know, we think that's really working against us. On reflection now, we think actually, you know, could it have been a positive thing, because we didn't come to farming with all these kind of preconceived ideas of what we should do. So setting that aside, you're thinking, right, if I want to start up a farming business, obviously the first thing that you're thinking is, well, knowledge, one, two, money. Because you know, no matter what kind of farming business you run, you need some level of infrastructure. You know, even if it's very basic stuff like some electric fencing, you know, buying the animals, you know, it adds up. And we didn't have any at that stage. So the first thing was, if we want to farm, what's the way? Rather than thinking, how can I make the most money? It was thinking, how can I spend the least money? And that's how we started. And one of the ways to spend the least money in our eyes was to work with what we've got. So look at what was around us, look at the grassland that was around us, the woodlands, the landscape, look at the climate, look at all of that, our location, and think, what have we got, and what animals, if we're going to go into farming, are going to work here. So cattle wise, it was like, well, Highland cattle are going to work here because they're hardy, they're hairy, they eat heather, they eat grasses, they eat tree leaves, they eat lichens. So we don't have to change, we don't have to spend any money on changing the landscape. They're kind of quite docile animals whenever they're well handled, so we can move them around the fields, getting them to spread that, you know, manure around, which is obviously going to feed the soil. So we're not having to fertilize the fields because the animals are going to do it for us. And then at the end, we have this incredible produce, which is going to be pure Highland beef, which we can market as pure Highland beef and get a maximum kind of return on that. Our overheads are low because, you know, we carry low numbers, so we maximize the grazing season. So we're trying to reduce our hay costs in the winter. And, you know, really we estimate that a Highland cattle for 1 year costs us about £100. So our overheads are really, really, really low. And then we're seeking to maximize it at the other end. So that was one of the real principles of farming with nature for us, was rather than change the land, so rather than go in and plough and reseed, rather than buy an animal that we're going to have to house all winter that's going to need expensive feed, you understand your land, you look at the animal that fits it, and then you put the two together. And that's really, I would say, the principles of it. We then kind of built on that for the other animals, and I always call them team members that we had, because you look at nature as a system, and the one thing that nature does not operate in is individuality. It does not operate in a monoculture. So therefore, what we wanted to do were have a kind of a suite of animals that worked as part of, you know, the ecology that nature is, which is a diverse kind of multi-beneficial system. The thing I love about nature is I always say that nature is not a competitive system, it's a collaborative system. Yes, you work to the benefit of yourself, but also for the benefit of everything around you. So it was thinking, right, you know, let's take that cattle example that I shared with you, okay? We've got the cattle moving around. They're, you know, they're dunging throughout the field. You know, they're not getting any treatments, low cost, you know, natural fertilizers. How about we throw some pasture hens into the mix? So we have a mobile hen house that works through the fields, you know, in and around where the cattle have been. Those hens then start to get into the area. They scratch out the moss, they scratch out the thatch, they scratch out the cow pats, spreading the fertility, helping it to break down quicker. And then they're providing us with this incredible egg to sell. So you kind of, it's a multi-layer. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, you've got the cattle moving through, the hens moving through, the cattle are providing you with beef, the hens are providing you in the very short term with eggs that you can sell. And the beauty about it is that you're getting paid to regenerate your land. And that, to me, I guess, is the essence of farming with nature. I think also, I could talk about this all night, so I'm going to try and be quick.
Please do. I'm loving it.
So I think also what I would say for us, the second element of farming with nature is looking at the business side. Okay, so you know, we run a very sort of, you know, a very sort of small setup here, but we are now full time here, so we have to, you know, we have to make it a you know, a profitable business so that we can pay the bills. You know, that's the fact of it. So I would say that our business model is also based on nature in that it's diverse. So, you know, it's a multi-legged stool. So we have Highland beef, we have rare breed pork, we have honey, we have eggs to sell, we do tours, we do courses, you know, we do talks, we build, everything kind of works out from that, so that, you know, that one-legged stool, if it loses that leg, it's not going to topple over, because there's actually another 10 that are going to prop it up. So actually farming with nature, I think, is also about a diversified business model that, you know, at the end of the day, it's all focused around food production. That's the fundamental core of it, but it then kind of blossoms out like a beautiful spring flower. You know, it's like a sunflower, you know, it's like got kind of the central part, but it's got all these like little petals off of it, and they're all interconnected. So for me, farming with nature is not just the birds and the bees, it's actually the business as well.
You said you could talk forever. I mean, honestly, I said please do. This is so interesting to me, and do you know that idea of nature collaborating is brilliant.
Yeah.
And just sort of creating that, what would you say, that sort of eternal symbiosis of the whole place, you know.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Really interesting. And do you know, I think not the best part, I found all of it interesting, but the interesting part you said there was a lot of people that talk about, in particular in smaller places, regeneration and stuff like that, they focus solely on the nature and the regeneration and the food production, then like money.
Yeah.
And like you've totally integrated that business system into it. It is also a business, which makes it viable. It makes it not just a really cool idea. It makes it something that's going to work for a while.
I think that's it. And I think as well, you know, our business, you know, we are what we are. We are a small scale farm. We are a Scottish croft, and therefore we produce a small amount of food on the small amount of land that we have. So we can't sort of feed the world from that, but what we can do is feed ourselves and then contribute to feeding our local community. And that's what we really love about it. And I guess by working the business element in, it's showing that kind of system is valid and it is viable, and it can contribute not just to, the food production element, but community as a whole. And I think for me, that is what is the nuts and bolts of regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is, yes, it's about soil health, it's about the nature, but it's also about people. And regenerative agriculture is all about, I believe, reconnecting people with where their food comes from, getting them to care about that, making them feel like they want good food, making them feel better when they eat it, because it's like the best quality and it's come from 5 miles down the road and they can go and say hiya to your farmer. I think that's awesome.
That personality's got to add something to it, hasn't it? It's absolutely. And I find myself looking at the proverbial rabbit holes to jump down. Which one will I choose?
I've been down all of them.
and continue to do so. I want to get into the diversification side of Lynbreck, and you're producing food, you're farming with nature, but also the diversifications I'd like to get into as well.
Of course.
Before we get away from this, because it's something I've wanted to ask you since I brought you on, and I've totally forgotten. What is crofting law?
Did you really want me to talk all night? No, I'd love to say that I can't talk all night about this, because I know probably as much as you do, Wallace, in terms of crofting law. But it's basically that the land holding that we have is a registered croft that is protected or legalized or legislated under the Crofting Act, which is a legislation that came about after the Highland clearances, in a way to basically protect people who own these small parcels of land to never be cleared off the land again. It's a legislation that's devolved, I don't know it, however you want to describe it, throughout the years. It's notoriously complex. But what it's trying to do is protect the land so that it's always worked. And so there's two laws that we have to really kind of follow. One is that we have to live on or within 32 kilometers of the croft. And the second is that we have to work it. And now traditionally working it would have been agriculturally. Nowadays, it can mean also diversification. So you can have a croft and run like a little campsite or something on it, for example. I think the main thrust, and I say this without any kind of authority whatsoever, is that, you're keeping people on the land and you're keeping people in the community. So you've got the social and the economics, kind of working together.
And work it, does that have to be full-time?
No.
No, right.
No.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't have to be full-time. It's just basically to try and protect these, really special little places from being swallowed up in the land, is either not worked or, it's parceled up, and you've got the house that goes to a second home or something. Because generally crofts are in, I always get told off for saying this, but generally crofts are in the most beautiful part of Scotland, which is, the northwest, or dramatic or whatever, but the northwest, and then we're kind of on the eastern fringes of the crofting counties. But it's those really big dramatic landscapes and the kind of places where people just want to escape to. And I think that's where crofting law is really important, as long as it's enforced, that crofting is protected as a way of living on the land.
Well, if you live in somewhere pretty that's not Crofting County, Lynn has just called you out entirely.
I've done this before.
This place is prettier.
I've done this before, and then I find myself saying it, and I just think, oh, just be quiet, and then it just comes out. So yes, I'm yeah.
Just one quick question.
I can't get myself out of that, can I?
No, you won't.
No,
you won't. I'll make sure when I'm advertising it to mention that. I'll timestamp it and everything. Yeah. No.
Amazing.
You mentioned the pork was rare breeds. What rare breeds are they?
Yes. So usually we have Oxford Sandy and Black. Rare breed pigs. So we don't farrow on site. So we use we've got kind of a few local breeders in our area who specialize in that particular breed. Super breed, absolutely brilliant. So hairy, generally orange with black spots. Traditionally known as the plum pudding pig, or even the woodland pig as well. Really lovely temperaments. I always say that pigs have got like the biggest joie de vivre ever. They just love everything. Super smart, super intelligent, and we use them for different jobs around the croft. So, for example, when we got our first pigs, the first jobs that we used them for was to clear an area of ground, break, get their snouts in there, break it up. That we were then going to plant 320 trees as part of a shelter belt, which was going to connect two woodlands. So it was going to be not only providing shelter, but a really nice kind of habitat corridor. Mm-hmm. So rather than us doing all the work, we got the pigs to do the work for us. Obviously a bit of fertilizer in there as well from their back end, and then we went in and planted. We also use pigs in our woodlands or in kind of sort of slightly more rougher grazings, I would say. We work them through, they snuffle, they break up the ground, and they expose little pockets of soil where either, things like seeds that are in the seed bank can pop up and grow, or tree seedlings can fall and kind of new growth. So again, it's thinking of, how do we use our pigs in a way that regenerates the land that we have all the time. And then what we do, Wallace, is whenever they've kind of had their time here, making sure they're always kind of super busy, super active. They then go off we take them to the abattoir ourselves. Then we bring them back to Lynbreck from the abattoir after the kill to butcher them. So we have an on-site micro butchery here. So we bring the animals back, and we do, for our pork, we do all of our own butchery ourselves. We also, we also do a lot of kind of added value range, because, coming back to the economics of small scale farming, what was the biggest eye opener for us was that whenever we sold our first pork, even when we were kind of charging it as, kind of a higher than average, market rate, we weren't making any money. And that was a big wake up call, So we were thinking, right, moving forward, how do we do this? How do we make this viable? And we can do the marketing side. We can talk about the work they do. We can talk about how they're on organic feed. We can talk about the regenerative benefits, but that's still only going to get you a certain height, a certain ceiling. So you're in a conundrum. So do you either, so what do you do? Do you get more pigs? But if you get more pigs, are they going to be still regenerative? Do you have the land? Because pigs need a lot of land. You're going to need to carry them more regularly. Are you going to be hitting areas too hard year on year? So one, do we compromise what we believe are our kind of true core regenerative principles by increasing stocking? Or do we maintain the current stocking levels, and instead we take the produce and add value to it? And that was the decision that we made. So by installing our own micro butchery on site, we could start to create this incredible range of produce that you simply cannot buy, in any shops, all handcrafted by us. Just incredible thing. Like, we come up with all sorts of ideas. Like we created a pork and organic cheddar cheese sausage. Taking chunks of our local cheddar from our nearby organic dairy, mixing it in with our kind of top secret sausage recipe, and then getting that out. And people go nuts for it. It's the kind of stuff, as I say, you can't buy, or just even making some really nice oak smoked streaky bacon, from rare breed pigs. You're taking the value of something that's maybe £1 a kilo, and then you're making it £10 a kilo. So for us, that was an additional way to increase the income without compromising what we wanted to achieve here by just simply increasing production.
First off, that wasn't fair. I mean, I haven't had my dinner, and you're going to do all lovely things.
Me neither.
And secondly, I just love the image of Lynn and Sandra can never go anywhere together because the secret recipe will disappear.
No. People have asked. We don't tell them. No, we don't tell them. No.
That's why Sandra's not here tonight. That's the only reason.
It is top secret.
Some of those just sound brilliant. I mean, it's this will be, I'm just trying to think where we are. I'm filming a bit early. This will be R2Kast 34. 31 was Stephen Mitchell of the Buffalo Farm. And talked about the adding value thing. And I do a module on adding value. And from when I did my degree, which I graduated from 2018, I think, beef and lamb products were 425%, give or take, retail that they were wholesale. And pork was about 380 from memory.
Right.
Mental. And I think it's really cool that you guys talk about that, and you talk about that real side of it. So many people are like, let's buy a farm, they make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just not reality. I always think of that David Mitchell comedy. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but he's like, buy a farm, you know, corn grows out the ground, you know. It's sorry to every Cornish person ever. But
Terrible.
dreadful. Maybe should take that note. But it's good to sort of see the real side of that, and the fact that really isn't the case. And I've mentioned Stephen Mitchell there, and I've mentioned it intentionally for a bit of a caveat into you guys were on the TV
yes,
as part of This Farming Life. Now, I'm going to hold my hand up. I told you before we filmed, I watch nothing. As I said to you, if it's not The Office, when I'm in bed, I watch nothing. I've seen very small snippets of The Farming Life. Could you tell us about that, how it came about, what was involved as well, I guess, and what it sort of did for you guys?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and it's quite a fun one, reflecting back on Farming Life. So we were on series 3. So the camera crew were following us in 2018. Now 2018 was the first year, like our first formal official year of bringing livestock onto the croft and really starting to try and build up a farming business, because it's worth pointing out that, you know, now Sandra and I are here full time. For the first 4 years we were working off farm, you know, to try and kind of bring in the income that was needed to sort of keep things taken over as we built everything up. So anyway, so the reason the kind of Farming Life came about because a friend, we don't have a TV, okay, so a bit like you, we don't watch anything. Well, we can't because we haven't got a TV, but it's tricky. So I didn't know anything about Farming Life. Anyway, a friend tagged us and said, "Oh, you know, they're looking for another. You know, you should kind of look, you know, go for it." So, I kind of, I don't know, I had one of those kind of wild moments where I kind of, you know, shot from the hip and fired off an email, and lo and behold, the lady called back and said, "Yeah, we're really interested. We want to come out and film you," and you know. Fast forward another few months, then we got a call saying, okay, you know, we want you to be in the series, and can we come and start filming next week? And we had this kind of moment. So the call came through, and I kind of went running down to Sandra and I went, do we want to do this? And you know, do we want to do this? It was one of those sort of moments, and really it feeds into everything that's actually very relevant to even this conversation right now, Wallace. This kind of thing that I'm doing with you right now is that we found ourselves not only in a completely different place in our lives in terms of in farming, but also in terms of, you know, talking about what we do. We've become so impassioned about food production in this way that, you know, in small scale farming and farming with nature, that we really feel part of what we're here to do is to share that story, and to share it in a way that's realistic, but actually that's very positive, and that's very solution focused, and that's practical, viable and valid, and all those kinds of things. So whenever we were thinking about Farming Life, obviously we were really green, you know, for want of a better way of putting it. You were right at the start of our journey, but we thought, you know what, let's do this. Let's show people what it's actually truly like whenever you're bringing your first ever Highland cows onto your, you know, your farm or croft, and you've never really been around them before. Or what does it look like whenever you're bringing pigs on for the first time, and then you're taking them to the abattoir for the first time? You know, what does that look like? How does that feel? What does it look like whenever you're talking about, oh yeah, and then we're going to have all these cows, and then we're going to have all these chickens that are going to follow them? What does that look like? How do you build the mobile hen house? How do you do all this kind of stuff? So we thought, you know what, we're going to do Farming Life because we want to share a story, and what we were determined was that it would be a positive story that would help others figure out their journey, and help others feel that, you know, they're not alone in wanting to do things in this way. So that's kind of how Farming Life came about. And then they followed us for 9 months. I think we were in 7 of the 12 episodes. And you know, the one thing that I really love is that, you know, I look back and I really don't like watching it. You know, I'm always like highly critical, and I'm like, well, why am I laughing there? I look stupid. And, you know, that kind of thing is, you know, I was obviously really nervous at the time, and I'm like going, ha ha ha. And, you know, just things like that. But I watch it back now, and I think actually 2 things. One, in the very last episode, Sandra is filmed in the field, and she's talking about the importance of soil health. And I loved that because that was a really critical core message that is the center of regenerative agriculture that was getting into the homes of tens of hundreds of thousands of people. So one, that was awesome. The second thing was you watch back Farming Life, and apart from my nervous laughter, we actually laughed and smiled so much that year. And for us, it felt like it was a really hard year. You know, it was a really challenging year. We didn't know what we were doing. We were frightened, you know, at times. We found things like bringing the pigs to the abattoir difficult. I cried on camera. Such a roller coaster of a year. We were still working off farm. You know, we weren't making any money at that point. But I watched those 7 episodes and I thought, actually, maybe it wasn't so bad. And that's what people saw, and that was great.
I hope you've kicked your feet up and got comfy and enjoying another fantastic episode of the R2Kast with another really interesting guest. I would just like to quickly take another second to plug the sponsors of the show today, the Scottish Farmer, and I would strongly advise you to go out and pick one up this week and see even more of the fantastic people that are in our industry.
That is great. And I mean, you know, looking at it, the fear involved, and highly commendable, really. Just taking on a complete unknown, going for it, and then, do you know what? We don't know anything about this. Let's show the world. You know, and that's brilliant, because that's, I said at the start, this podcast is to try and get people into farming. Yeah. If people see that, they're going to think, well, if they can do it, there's no difference to us. Why can't we? And that's not putting you guys down at all, by the way.
No, but it's true. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, which is great, and I love the fact that looking back, you realised, oh my God, we were happy. There was a lot of stresses there, but in the moment, you were just loving life. There was hard times. There was. And one thing I have seen is Jeremy Clarkson's farm, and that one bit that resonates hugely with me, and I think did so much for farming in this country, was when he's taken the stock to the abattoir, and it hits him. And it does, does hit you. No matter how many hundreds you've put away in your life, there's a connection there, and people can't take that away from farmers. They absolutely cannot.
No, absolutely not.
So how long were they with you, with the cameras?
So they were here for 9 months. So they started in January 2018, and they were sort of pretty much wrapped up by the end of September 2018. And then the series came out, I think it was the following February, and it came out in 2 blocks. So like a six episode block, and then another 6 episode block. And
that was pretty much 9 months straight, or on and off?
On and off. So what would happen is that so we had like a little WhatsApp group with the camera crew. So it was just a girl on camera, and then a guy, a sound guy, and they would basically kind of message us and say, hey, you got anything going on this week? So it was quite nice, because we could, I mean, they weren't with us full time, which would have been really, I mean, that would have been really, really hard. They were lovely. They were really lovely. You know, they became very, very close to us, but yeah, having a camera crew for that amount of time would have been really hard. But it was quite nice, because it meant that we could, you know, say, yeah, we're doing this week, or no, we haven't got anything going on, so that you weren't making up jobs. You know, the whole idea was that they were filming you real time, doing real stuff, and that's pretty much what they got really with us.
No, that's interesting, because I was interested to ask that question, because it's that in media there is that, oh, I do this for the camera. But from what I've ever spoken to anyone in this farming life, it very much seems like it was only filmed if it was happening. Which is so good. It shows what's real, and it's almost always positive. There's bad stuff, but there's a positive intention there, and that's so good to get out to those millions of folk, as you're saying.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that was 2018.
Yes.
I did a bit of research, as I do, and some people are easier to research than others. You're very easy to research, and that there's a lot about it all. 2018 was somewhat of a record, award-winning year, shall I say. I mean, I've got some examples here, and I think I only took about half. Best New Entrant Business, Best Crofting New Entrant, Compassion in World Farming Sustainability, Food Sustainability Award, which I was really interested to talk about, because CIWF sometimes get tarred with the pita brush.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I say to my students, my ag students all the time, this always gets a reaction. I agree with all the principles of Peter, because I think we do. We're all for animal welfare, all this sort of thing. It's sort of where the activism comes in. And the CIWF one's always interesting because they sort of get tarred with the same brush, but very much of good intentions. And I don't think it's the same. And I really wanted to know what that award involved. What was that for specifically?
So it was their Sustainable Food and Farming Award. So it was for, they were looking for a farm. They actually awarded 2 awards that year. So they awarded 2 awards to small scale farms. So it was us and a dairy down, I think they're down in the south of England somewhere. Right. And they actually then awarded the Sustainable Food and Farming Awards, large scale awards, which actually went to McDonald's, believe it or not. Yes. Because they're doing a lot of trials at the minute, kind of regenerative agriculture trials to try and, I guess, improve their beef supply. So it was really, it's a charity that I find really interesting, and they say an awful lot of good stuff. And I guess this award is a way to, I guess, reward positively the kind of farming that they support, that they kind of nail their colors on, and that they would want to be associated with.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure I wasn't saying they're a bad company. I wanted to make sure.
No, absolutely, yes.
They sometimes do get tarred with that brush. I would say wrongfully, but it's interesting you mentioned McDonald's won that, and I back that. I think McDonald's do a lot of good. It's obviously in a much more intensive system than a lot of places, but for the most part, heavily local country, whatever they're in, supporting all that sort of thing. I think they do a lot of good stuff, McDonald's, but. If you want to have a look at the awards, Lynn and Sandra obviously deservingly won. I think there's loads. I don't know how many, endless amounts. But you probably not even put them all in.
Do you know what, Wallace? It's kind of like I'm going to go back to why we did Farming Life and why I'm talking to you and all that kind of stuff. That's what's important to us. We are so. We're motivated by producing our own food. We're motivated by having a good life. We're motivated by waking up every morning with a smile on our face and going to bed with a smile at night. Those are our, kind of core values, core motivations in life. But what we're also motivated about is getting a really positive story out there. Now, what we absolutely are not is, look at us, this is how you do it. That is everything that we are not. What we are is, this is one way of doing it, and this is the story of how we got to this point. But it is all about really good food. It's about really good mental and physical health. And it's about community, and it's about people, and it's about nature, and it's about connecting the two, and it's about seeing ourselves as part of this whole system and not separate. That is why we do what we do. That is why I'm, sitting with you here chatting in a podcast in the evening. That is why we kind of spend time on social media. Sometimes, you think, I'm tired today. I kind of don't want to do this, but actually, whenever then people, and I'm sure they do this when your podcast, they'll say, oh man, that episode was awesome. Thank you so much for making that. It's like whenever people say, oh, thanks so much for that, that tour that you just took me on. I get farming a little bit more now. And I mean, we get people who come here or who follow us on Instagram. I would say the majority are not in farming. And I always find that quite interesting. It's people who are wanting to connect with the land. And it's people who are wanting to understand more about where their food comes from. And I think that's incredible to be able to have that conversation with people who don't know that a cow is not just a cow and a sheep is not just a sheep. They come out here and they see it. And, we walk around, whenever we do, like I say, for example, one of our public tours, you walk around and we say, this is this, that's that. This is why we do this. This is how it looks different to, say, kind of conventional agriculture or mainstream agriculture. This is a shed that we built. It cost this much money. That's how much it costs to build sheds. And we applied for a grant to fund that, because did you know that farming is subsidized? Here's how it's subsidized. You can get these grants, or you can get farming subsidy, blah, blah, blah. And then you have those open conversations, and, you can literally see people going, oh, I didn't know that. And it's bonkers. I find that kind of, really, really enlightening, because I think really at the end of the day, farming is about producing food, which goes to the people. So how do the people not know all of this? And, And it's having those conversations like I bet you do with your students.
Yeah, and not just students. I mean, I'm talking at the NFU AGM tomorrow, and you're talking different places all the time. BBC videos talking, you find yourself speaking with people that had nothing to do with farming, questions about this. It's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. And farming to farming as well. The amount of things you learn talking to each other.
Goodness, absolutely.
I mean, every day truly is a school day. And I think that you guys are sitting at the best part of 10,000 followers on Instagram, and there's a lot of people with big followings out there in farming, and a lot of people with big followings out there in general. And I think social media can be so negatively positive. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like it's almost like this is perfect.
Yeah.
But there's so much hidden behind that, and I think there's so much merits in talking about the realness about it. Just quickly get in. Well, I say quickly again. We could talk for hours about this part itself. The two more main parts I really want to cover. You guys have diversified hugely. You have a farm in itself that's again regenerative. You've got different animals there producing lots of different food that's working alongside the biodiversity. But also bills have to be paid. There's other money that has to come in there. What diversifications have you got? You've mentioned tours, which is a very, I'm not going to say strange diversification, but certainly not the most common jump to diversification.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to sort of highlight, emphasize again, is that all of the diversification, as I say, kind of blossoms out from the core model, which is the food production element. But before we go on to the diversification, every single one of our food producing enterprises cannot run at a loss. That's the deal. So none of our so they all have to stand on their own 2 feet. So that's really important to emphasize, is that the diversification does not prop them up. They have to be self-funding at the very, very minimum. Okay, they have to be self-funding. So then the diversification blossoms from that. So we do tours. So we do in the summertime, we do a monthly public tour, which people can book onto, and then we offer private tours as well. We also do a few tours for tourism companies. So there's one in our area called Wilderness Scotland. They kind of do a lot of tours around kind of wilder living. So they come here for a couple of hours with a group. And we also work with a charity called Scotland, the Big Picture, who are a rewilding charity. And that's really interesting because we'll get a group of people who have come, who are very passionate about rewilding, and they come here for 2 or 3 hours and we talk about farming. And that's brilliant because it shows how, it's not one or the other, and we have really good conversations there. I always believe that you diversify based on what your strengths are. So you've probably gathered from this conversation that I like to talk. Okay, I'm from Ireland. It's a national sport. It's what we do.
I'm the same. It's fine.
Okay, great. And I always do it with a cup of tea, which I have here. Land Rover mug. There we go.
See that?
Yeah. So that's something that I really enjoy doing. So offering the diversification in terms of that sort of side seemed to really fit in with my skill set in particular. So we thought, right, let's go with that. It's also a way, that we can kind of earn a little bit extra income. And it's also a way that delivers that bigger core vision of what Lynbreck is about, which is, reconnecting people with food and nature. So it kind of ticks all the boxes. So another diversification that we do is we now offer courses as well. So we thought that it would probably be of real value to write our own course based on our direct experience here at Lynbreck. So it's a really kind of hands-on, engaged, 5-day, I guess, quite intensive course where people come, they can camp on site, they eat some of our produce, and they learn from everything that we've done. And what I love about the course is that, one afternoon you're out with the cattle. Okay, so Sandra's been through, handling, and you go out and you're in with the cattle. We're talking about regenerative grazing, mob grazing. We're looking at electric fencing, all these kind of principles, animal welfare, cattle health, blah blah blah. The next day, you're inside with me. We do it in the barn, and we're talking about what does accounting look like if you live whereby you don't get a salary every month. What does that look like? What are the tax bands? What are the tax that you're going to have to pay? What is VAT? what's accounting software? I know you're looking at it going, oh, but it's kind of bringing that real-time element into it. And then the next day or the next morning, you're in the kitchen garden and we're talking all about growing food for yourself. So we're talking about skills of no-dig gardening. We're talking about permaculture. We're looking at the vegetable crops that we grow. We're going into the polycrub, and we're talking about growing tomatoes at 350 meters above sea level in the north of Scotland. So it's so kind of varied, and it's with us directly. And again, that's ticking all the boxes in that, we're sharing food, we're sharing knowledge, people are coming here, and it's a course that people pay for. So it's an income stream for us. So that kind of really fit. An additional diversification that we've just gone into is we have a private rental on site. So when we bought Lynbreck, there were kind of 2 old stone buildings that were pretty much derelict. One had half a roof, and the other one was kind of watertight, but only just. So one of them was the buyer. So we kind of renovated that with the support of what was at the time a new entrance capital grant, which sadly is no longer available. And then we recently renovated the other one, and that's a residential property. So we let that out. So again, it's another income stream. So what we have, and then, I mean, some people would say that doing things like our butchery is diversification.
For sure,
we see that as kind of being really kind of linked into the food element. So that's our kind of main diversification. And then I guess most recently is the fact that we've just written a book. So
which you've that is literally the next thing to go
look
into.
At that.
Look at that. Do you want a co-host?
What, you mean this old thing? What?
Oh, look at that! Fantastic.
It's like product placement.
Yeah, I know. Have you got any sausages lying there and like that? Just by chance.
They are for my dinner, but
and diversification in some ways is not the only way forward for places to be, for a lot of places to be, and let's think post subsidy, whatever that might be. I am not a policy person. I know nothing about politics.
No.
But the course thing is really interesting. I mean, that really, I mean, the whole idea of that 5-day course just sounds like fun, doesn't it? Like it sounds like an enjoyable time to sit down and just do that and then go out and do that. I mean, it's kind of like what happens when I go home and mum tells me to do this, and that sounds very similar. And I probably take it for granted, actually. Really, it was very similar.
Honestly,
similarities are huge.
Absolutely.
So yes, the book is what I've written. The book. Could you tell us about the book, because I haven't got its title, so I can't remember it. But yeah, how long's that taken to come about? And I assume publishing a book's quite a right. It's going out.
Yes. Yeah, it's exciting, exhilarating, and utterly terrifying in equal measure. So the book came about after farming life, in that we were approached by a publisher. So it's this publisher called Chelsea Green, who we actually knew about the publisher because they produce the most awesome range of books on regenerative farming. They produce books by, to me, what are kind of the real leading figures of regenerative farming, people like Joel Salatin, people like Gabe Brown, Charles Massey, those are all Chelsea, they've all kind of published with Chelsea Green. So this email pops in and, I'm like, is this a joke? And, I spoke to I kind of called this guy, really nice guy, had a chat. He said, right, look, we're really interested in your story. Would you write 800 to 1,000 words for us? Let's just see if you can write. Did that. Thumbs up. Okay, so what we now want you to do is work that up into a chapter, so about 5,000 words. And we want to actually get you to expand it even further. And we want you to basically list out what a book would look like. So took about a month out, had a bit of a conversation. First of all, again, we had another conversation, like, do we want to do this? It's going to be a lot of work. But again, thought, well, yeah, let's kind of just keep going on this mad journey that's life, and let's roll with it, because it's a lot of fun. Who gets asked to do these kinds of things? That's such an incredible opportunity. So thought, let's give it a go. Put that through to them. He took it to the board, gave it a thumbs up. So basically I think this was all in lockdown year, by the way. So for a lot of us, so lockdown year for us was a really interesting one, because that point that I made about each individual enterprise has to be self-funding. that was tested in lockdown year because we couldn't do any of our diversification outreach. Tours were cancelled, courses were cancelled. The holiday, our property to rent wasn't ready. So everything had to be funding itself, and that was the real test. And luckily, it did. So anyway, so the book contract came about in October 2020. We finished the writing and had it all approved by July 2021. So it was a real kind of roller coaster of a ride, writing it and yeah, becoming a writer. I did this thing with a guy called, Patrick Laurie, who's written
I know that name.
So he's written a book called Native. I've not read his book, but he's a very well-spoken guy, and I know that he's incredibly good with words. And I did an event with him, and he described himself as an author first and a farmer second. And I remember I was at the same event and went, well, I am definitely not an author. But now I'm kind of thinking, oh, maybe it's not too bad. But no, so we had this, so it all kind of went through, and then it all went through the publisher, all approved. And then it's basically been since July where it's gone through endless numbers of edits. Chelsea Green are an American and UK company, so it's being released in the US as well as the UK. And basically, Wallace, it's the story of our journey. It's the story of, a long version of everything that I've told you in more detail. And I think as well, detailing a lot more the challenges that we faced. And I don't mean not just in terms of farming, I mean personally, working yourself to the bone, struggling with animals dying, how that feels when you've only ever been used to having, a cat, for example, as a pet, and struggling with the financial side of things, struggling with, leaving your job to follow your dreams, as well as all the good stuff too. So it's been really, really fun to write. And now we're at the stage where it's gonna, it's out, and it's exciting and terrifying. Having people reading your book and then kind of telling you that they like it is really exciting. But you're putting yourself out there.
Of course you are, and I think to make it good, you really have to.
Yes,
I think people connect with reality in general, and I mean, I didn't know I didn't know two of the names you said, but Joel Salatin's like the king of it. He's like, he was, that's really cool, and wow. And I have to apologise. I mean, I say I don't watch TV. I also don't read books. I'm just heavily uneducated. But
and you're moulding the future of farming in this country.
But I'm not a book reader either, but that sounds like one that I could sit down and read. It'd probably take me like 4 years to read, but that sounds brilliant.
It's a story. It's not it's a story. We wanted it to be a kind of story where somebody like you could pick it up, or somebody that's in farming can pick it up and relate to it. Equally, it's the kind of story where somebody in the top floor flat in London can pick up and relate to it. It's just a human story. That's what it is at the end of the day. And yes, we do, talk about some details that are in farming, but in a way that's almost what we're trying to do is take the reader on that journey with us. And that's really what it's about. So it's not a technical manual. It's a story. It's a human story.
Yeah, and there's emotion in there, and folk can connect.
Absolutely.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, sorry, no, on you go.
I was going to say it's called Our Wild Farming Life. So
good tying it in. Life.
So it was, that was really kind of, the publishers were quite keen with that title because it connects it to This Farming Life, which obviously has such a massive following, both in the farming and the non-farming community. So the idea of the title was to kind of try and tie it in. But the use of the word wild was because, as I've kind of said to you, 2 years of our life before coming into farming was in rewilding. And, that's a whole other kind of topic of conversation. But, some people have kind of said that how we farm is a version of wilding farming or wilder farming, a la the type that on a much bigger scale, say people like Isabella Tree at the Knepp Estate do, so it's another version, it's another model, it's not the same thing, but it's kind of embracing that kind of, the wildness of nature as being part of, your farming landscape.
Brilliant. Well, I know. Do you know what? I'm gonna read a book. I'm gonna do it. The last book I read was a Kipper the dog does weather. Which I
Good.
believe I'm pretty sure it's 43 words because I went back to check when my teacher laughed at me. I was like, I finished the book. Okay.
Could he do weather? I mean, could he actually do?
Well, he just stood in weather. It was
Okay.
heavily unriveting, but for me, the non-red collegiate helped me. I would like to confirm I was genuinely about 11 at this stage. Like this isn't like a 2-year-old.
Sure, you were. Sure. Yeah. Nervous laugh.
Yeah, exactly. That old chestnut. That's been great. I mean, as I said at the start, it's a very interesting guest as it always is. But that has been a very good episode. I always finish every episode with 2 questions.
Here we go.
They're not too hard, and I think you will manage. The first one is, where do you see yourself in 5 years, or yourselves in 5 years? And secondly, always ask, if you had tips for folk, and you guys are perfect for this question, tips for folk coming into the industry, what would they be?
So let's go for the first one, because I'm pretty sure that we're still going to be here in 5 years. When we look at the future of Lynbreck, I think we're kind of taking it, we very much take it day by day. So, we're always looking at our own thing, which is our own food production. So we're always looking at ways, how can we grow ourselves more food? We reckon that now, Wallace, in terms of what we grow for ourselves, we can grow about 95% of our year-round vegetables from our kitchen garden and our polycrub. So we're
Brilliant.
so how can we do that more? So we get excited about sort of things like, and then next year we're going to plant more fruit bushes, and then the year after we're going to, make a root cellar, and then the year after we're going to get dairy goats and we're going to make milk and cheese. So we kind of have these kind of personal, I guess, life goals. In terms of where Lynbreck as a business is going to be, we do think about how can we increase the food productivity of the land without compromising, our kind of regenerative principles. So, I like going back to that example I used before with the pigs, rather than just upscaling pigs, it was add value. So a project that we're starting this winter, which is really exciting, is starting to plant fruit trees in our fields. So we're starting, so the idea is to kind of every year, every 2 years, we're self-funding it. So it's quite pricey. So we can only do a little bit each year. But the idea is to sort of create these blocks of productive fruit trees in our fields that the cattle will continue to graze through. So we're not losing any kind of grazing at all. But we're in the long term, massively increasing the food productivity of the land. So I think we'll kind of continue to go along that way. And that's what I'm sort of fairly certain about. But who knows? It's a journey. We're on it, and we're just going to enjoy it and make the most of it. In terms of the advice,
just before you answer that next question, before I forget, I think you'll like this one. This is a little chestnut, as the story goes. Is there squirrels around you or not?
Red squirrels. They're getting there. Yeah, we've seen a couple here. Yes. So
here's a little fun fact. If you grow nuts in any way, be that whatever, and you put what would you do? See how you sort of get like a whirligig, and you put the pole into the metal bits in the ground.
Yeah.
You've got the wee sort of pole that's on the ground. If you put that in the ground, and you put it near that nut bush, whatever, and there's squirrels there, they'll keep them there. They'll almost be your harvesters. Wow. They'll sit them in there, and you can get a few nuts, and they get to keep theirs there for the rest of the time. That was that Carl from that Sustainable Hub that said that in his podcast. Oh, very cool. Like, oh my God, I've got to remember that one. That is an incredible fact. Feel free to use that one. Thank you. Yeah, we'll trademark it to you via. Be a handy ad. Yeah. So the advice. I mean, that's such a difficult question, Wallace. But I think really I can only base it on my own life experience. And, I didn't get into farming until we moved to Lynbreck when I was it 36, 37? So I was very much a late bloomer, as we say. Yep. But I'd spent a lot of the years previous to that
just figuring out what life was about. And I think quite often whenever we're younger, we're sort of, we get ideas about something and then we kind of go hell for leather for it. And then maybe it doesn't quite work out how we want it to. And we try a different career path, and then we try a different career path. And I think the first thing that I would say is, try lots of different things, get lots of experience. Don't devalue the importance of that. You might be desperate to have land, have your own farm, have your own little business, but don't devalue the importance of the experience that you can build up to that point. And I'm going to provide you with a really couple of random examples just to illustrate that. One is my time as a National Trust trainee ranger. I learned how to use a chainsaw. I learned how to fell trees. Since coming here, that's been really important because I can fell trees, and that's what provides us with firewood. When I was a National Trust Ranger, I also learned how to write endless amounts of risk assessments. That was really important for when I'm writing risk assessments for tours and courses. So I'm taking that learning and I'm applying it to where I am today. And I'm so grateful that I have that learning. Even random things like, we had to do a survey of a bit of woodland that we wanted to get a bit of funding for natural regeneration from Scottish Forestry. There was some archaeology on that site. Because I had a background in archaeology, I could write a report that I knew what it needed to say. I knew what I needed to write about the mitigation that we needed to do to protect these kind of archaeological features. And I kind of applied that. So no matter where you are in life right now, you're learning and you are actually progressing towards the goal. You just don't quite know that's the way that it is. And now that I'm very old, I can now reflect and look back and think that. So the point I'm trying to make is be in the now, live in the now, never lose sight of where it is that you're trying to achieve. Ultimately, if it is in farming, then great. If it changes to be something else, then that's fine too. But really be grateful for every second, because it's all contributing to where you're going to end up.
First off, very old is not what you are.
Just old. Careful.
How much of a trap is this? In other things, I love when I ask the 5 years question and folks say essentially the same thing. I love that, because I'm like, you're happy, you're enjoying it. Great. Yeah. Yes, more stuff, but certainly as it is. And I think that the sort of underlying message on the next part was there's loads of transferable skills.
Oh yeah, big time.
Did a master's in food security and then went on and worked in enterprise, rent a car, and now I'm a lecturer. Like there's so many different things to learn from. But all very good, and I hope you've enjoyed listening. It's became weekly now, as I said earlier. It's great fun to have loads more people to meet. This all started during COVID, and the podcast in general has been great fun because you couldn't speak to anyone. You're meeting so many folk, and I've met now 40 people throughout this podcast that I would probably not have met before, and it's been great for you to be one of them, Lynn. So I appreciate you coming on. I hope you've enjoyed your time. I think that's just sort of sitting just over an hour, which is absolutely perfect. And I best let you get on to have your probably home reared dinner.
Yeah, it's sausages tonight. So listen, Wallace, thank you so much for having me on. It's been so much fun talking to you, and I think the way that you present and do this podcast is absolutely brilliant. You're making it so accessible to so many people, I'm really grateful for you to give us the opportunity to come on and chat with you tonight. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the very kind words. Very good of you. It's here. Everyone says this, you do this great podcast. It's pretty hard to do a good podcast with other folk on it. You need the good guests. If I just come on here and talk for an hour, folk would be pretty bored pretty quick.
Oh, I don't know.
So, I think you would. Ask my students to hear it all the time.
Okay.
Well, that's it. Another R2Kast finished. Another agricultural mind opened up. And I would just like to say that getting these guests on board, it does take time, and it always has done, but I've now went weekly, and with that comes even more time required. And I would just like to finally thank once more the Scottish Farmer for sponsoring the show and making that much more possible. Please be sure to get in touch if you've any ideas of people you'd like to see on the podcast, or maybe ideas you have for me presenting better, because I definitely do require that. See you in the next one.